I used to think betrayal would come like a slap, loud and stinging. But the truth is, it's quiet. It comes in sideways glances, polite silences, and smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. I was 29, head of marketing at a fast-growing startup, the kind that hosts rooftop parties and puts kombucha on tap, and I thought I had it all. A fiancé who held my hand at company galas. A best friend who shared my passwords, my secrets, and my spare keys. I didn't realize I was handing them both the tools to destroy me. His name was Marcus. Sharp suits, sharper jawline. He looked like ambition and smelled like leather and clean money. We met during a pitch competition. He said I looked like someone who already owned the room. I thought that meant he respected me. Turns out, it just meant he wanted to take what I had. Her name was Talia. My college roommate. The girl who cried into my shoulder after her first breakup, who sent me memes at 2 a.m., who swore she'd never be one of those women who stole someone else's man. But people are liars, and I was a fool. It happened slowly. A text Marcus didn't mean for me to see. Talia's lipstick in the car he borrowed. A conversation I overheard outside his office when I arrived early with coffee and croissants. She's convenient, Talia said. She thinks she's in control. Let her plan the wedding. You'll be mine by launch day. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went home, opened a bottle of cheap wine, and packed everything I owned in silence. When I left, I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even leave a note. And yet, the next morning, I was the one trending online. A leaked memo. A scandal. My name replaced with hers on the new product line. Marcus named interim CEO. Talia promoted to creative director. The story? I'd stepped down for personal reasons. I watched my career die from a dingy hotel bed with a dead phone and half a burrito on the nightstand. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I walked out the next morning to clear my head and didn't notice the light had turned red. Horns. Screams. Then blackness. But I woke up. Not in a hospital. Not in a coma. In a canopy bed, silk sheets wrapped around a body that wasn't quite mine, but somehow was. I gasped, stumbled to a mirror, and saw her. The face was mine, but younger. More delicate. Framed in long dark curls. A voice behind me spoke. Princess Serafina, your father is waiting. I turned. A maid. Bowing. Her eyes wide with fear. You're late for court. I nodded, though I understood nothing. My mouth said words I didn't choose. My body moved without thinking. But inside, I was screaming. I wasn't a princess. I was Ava Chen. And someone, somewhere, had given me a second chance. The court was a nightmare. Marble walls, velvet chairs, and rows of people I didn't know glaring like I'd spit in their wine. My father, King Alaric, I'd later learn, barely looked at me. You're a disgrace, he said. Try not to embarrass us today. I nodded again, numb. I was dressed in gold. Everyone else in royal blue. I stood out like a wound. At the far end of the hall, Talia stood tall in a gown of silver and smirked. They called her Lady Talia here. Advisor to the crown. She looked the same. Same smirk. Same eyes. Same cruelty behind the charm. Beside her, Marcus. Now Lord Marius, commander of the royal guard. They were engaged. Of course they were. I was too stunned to speak. My body remembered how to curtsy, how to sit in silence, how to be overlooked. But inside, my mind spun. This wasn't a coincidence. They were here. Reborn like me. And somehow, they still had the upper hand. The day blurred. I was mocked for my silence. Chastised for arriving late. Ignored when I tried to speak. By evening, I sat alone in my chamber, stripped of everything but my breath. Then he arrived. A man in black. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Storm in his eyes. Don't play games with me, he said. You may have the king fooled, but I see through you. I don't even know who you are, I whispered. That makes two of us, he replied coldly. His name was Sir Corwin. Captain of the Knights. Respected. Feared. Loyal only to the truth. And apparently, he hated me. Or rather, he hated Serafina. But I would prove I wasn't her. I just didn't know how yet. The next day, I helped a maid pick up a tray she dropped. No one noticed. The day after, I corrected a merchant ledger I'd overheard mentioned in court. A nobleman raised an eyebrow. And a week later, when a dispute between two vassals broke into shouting, I stood, offered a solution, and watched the room fall silent. "Who told you to speak?" the king barked. "No one," I said. "But someone had to." Corwin was watching. I saw the shift in his eyes. A flicker of something that wasn't disdain. Not yet trust. But maybe, just maybe, curiosity. That night, a note appeared on my pillow. "If you are not her, prove it. Meet me at midnight. Stables." Signed, C. I folded the note and smiled for the first time in this world. It wasn't a win. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And beginnings meant power. Even here. Even now. Even as a forgotten princess reborn. The stables at midnight were nothing like the ones from fairy tales. They smelled of hay and cold stone, the silence broken only by the gentle shifting of horses in their stalls. I arrived in a cloak too thin for the wind and boots too clean for mud, but I was learning. I no longer moved like a girl afraid to get her hands dirty. I moved like a woman who had died once and refused to waste her second life hiding in silk. Corwin was already there, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. He didn't offer a greeting. "Why are you pretending to be Seraphina?" he asked. "I'm not pretending," I said. "I just don't know how to be her anymore." He narrowed his eyes. "She would never say that." "Exactly." That hung in the air for a moment. Then he turned, walked deeper into the shadows, and motioned for me to follow. "Then let's find out who you are." That night, we didn't talk about the court or the crown. He asked me strange questions. What I thought of the stars, if I believed in second chances, whether I would save an enemy if no one was watching. I answered honestly, even when it hurt. Especially then. "You're not like her," he said finally. "Not the one I remember." "Was she cruel to you?" I asked. "No," he said. "Just fake. Like everything else in this palace." That made something deep inside me ache. Because that was exactly how I'd felt in my old life, smiling through betrayals, performing for approval that was never real. "Then maybe you're not as alone as you think," I said. He looked at me, long and hard, then walked away without another word. I didn't see him for 2 days. In that time, the court grew colder. Whispers spread about my sudden clarity, my sharper tone, my uncharacteristic grace in council sessions. "She's possessed," someone muttered. "Or she's finally snapped," said another. I didn't correct them. Let them think I was mad. Let them underestimate me. Meanwhile, Talia, Lady Talia, tightened her grip on the king. She always sat beside him now, whispering in his ear, suggesting new laws, new taxes, new punishments for anyone who defied her social order. And Marcus, he stood behind her like a shadow in a commander's armor, eyes scanning the court but always skipping over me, as if ignoring me would erase me again. But I refused to be erased. I began meeting with merchants in secret, offering fair trade deals in Seraphina's name. I started visiting the barracks to speak to the soldiers, asking questions no royal had ever asked. And one morning, I found a note under my breakfast plate. "The northern provinces are being taxed into ruin. Do something useful. See." I smiled. It wasn't kindness. But it was something better. A test. And I passed it. I rewrote the tax proposal by hand, citing trade logic and ethical law. I sent it to the king's steward and signed. It passed within the week. Corwin didn't say thank you. He nodded at me from across the great hall. And that was more satisfying than 1,000 courtly compliments. The next shift came during the autumn ball. A display of wealth and status, where women were measured by their jewels and men by their land. I wore black, an act of war in a room drenched in gold. Talia laughed when I entered. "Still playing dress up?" she said sweetly. "What's next? A crown made of paper?" "Funny," I replied. "You already have one." Her eyes flashed, but she said nothing more. She didn't have to. She thought she'd already won. And perhaps she had, for now. But I wasn't here to win tonight. I was here to be seen. And Corwin saw me. From the moment I stepped onto the ballroom floor, his gaze never left mine. He didn't ask me to dance. But when another noble tried, Corwin stepped between us. "She's with me," he said. The music didn't stop, but I did. The words echoed louder than the strings. "Am I?" I asked, looking up at him. His eyes softened just a breath. "You will be, if you keep moving like this." We danced. One song. No words. Just steps and breath and something crackling in the space between us. Afterward, I turned to leave. But his fingers caught my wrist. "Don't stop," he said quietly. "Whatever this is you're doing, it matters." And then he let go, disappearing into the crowd. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing something had shifted. Not just in him. In me. I was beginning to understand the language of power in this world. It wasn't always shouts and decrees. Sometimes, it was a look across a room. A word slipped into the right ear. A decision made when no one was watching. I was learning to be dangerous. And for the first time since waking in this world, I felt something close to hope. Not because I had changed the court. But because I had changed the way they looked at me. Especially him. Corwin. The cold knight who once saw me as a liar now saw me as a storm. And storms, once they begin, do not ask permission to rise. Power, I was learning, didn't come with a crown or a title. It came with attention, silent, heavy, and waiting to see what you do with it. After the autumn ball, everything shifted. Whispers turned to watchfulness. Those who once scoffed now paused when I entered a room, unsure whether to mock or bow. The king remained distant, distracted by Talia's poison-coated counsel, but even he began to glance my way in counsel, as if expecting me to speak. I didn't disappoint him. When a trade route dispute arose between two major provinces, I spoke with calm certainty and laid out a compromise that would earn the crown more coin without starving the people. The king approved it on the spot. Talia's smile tightened. Marius didn't look at me once. But Corwin. Corwin met my eyes from across the room and gave the slightest nod. That nod stayed with me all night. I dreamed of nothing and woke rested, which hadn't happened since the day I died in the old world. And it was only the beginning. I started requesting access to historical records, citing my role as royal daughter. The archivists hesitated at first, but fear of seeming disloyal did more than loyalty ever could. Within days, I had stacks of documents, old treaties, forgotten alliances, secrets buried beneath layers of ink and dust. I read until my eyes blurred. And I remembered. Not facts. Feelings. Patterns. Things Serafina once ignored. Things Ava had once overlooked. I was both now. And that made me dangerous. One evening, as I sat in the library annotating a charter, I sensed him before he spoke. "You don't belong in here," Corwin said from the doorway. "Neither do you," I replied without looking up. "Knights don't usually read." "I do," he said, stepping closer. "But not royal law. That stuff's poison." "Poison is only dangerous if you drink it," I said. "Otherwise, it's just leverage." He gave a short laugh, then fell quiet. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I was given a second chance," I said. "And I won't waste it trying to be liked." He studied me for a long time. "You've changed. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing." "No," he said softly. "Just, unexpected." That night, he didn't walk me back to my chamber. He stayed in the library, reading across from me in silence. And I realized we had moved into a new rhythm, not enemies, not allies, but something in between. Something that pulsed between pages and glances and moments no one else noticed. But the court noticed something. I was no longer invisible. That made me a threat. And threats had to be silenced. It started with a dress. My gowns went missing, replaced with ill-fitting ones that made me look childish and frail. Then the rumors returned, this time not about madness, but about corruption. "She's buying favor," one lady whispered. "Blackmailing the king," another muttered. None of it was true. But truth doesn't matter when perception can be poisoned. One morning, I found my private notes rearranged, sections missing. A message carved into my desk: "Thrones can be taken back." I didn't cry. I called for ink and wrote a letter to the treasury, exposing a discrepancy I knew Talia had buried months ago. It was subtle, just enough to delay her next proposal, just enough to make her sweat. When she passed me in the hall that afternoon, she didn't smile. She grabbed my wrist. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "I think it's just beginning," I said. "And you're already losing." She shoved me away. Marius stood a few steps behind her, arms folded, eyes cold. He didn't intervene. Just watched. And I saw it in his expression, he remembered more than he admitted. Not just this life. The last one too. He knew I was Ava. He just didn't know how. Yet. That night, I returned to the stables. Corwin was already there, brushing down his horse. He didn't speak as I approached. Just handed me a brush. We worked in silence until he finally said, "Someone's trying to break you." "Let them try," I said. "They'll find I've already been broken once." It didn't work. He looked at me, eyes unreadable. You're different from everyone here. You see the game. But you don't play it like they do. That's because I remember what it's like to lose, I said. And I'd rather burn this place down than lose again. He stepped closer. You keep talking like someone who's lived more than one life. I didn't blink. Maybe I have. The tension between us snapped taut. He didn't kiss me. But his hand brushed mine, a slow drag of skin against skin, and it felt louder than any words we could have said. Be careful, he murmured. The more power you gain, the more dangerous it becomes to want someone. Then it's a good thing I don't want anyone, I said, though it was already a lie. He didn't call me out on it. He just nodded once and walked into the dark. I stayed behind, breathing hard, heart racing, not with fear, but with clarity. I was making progress. Corwin was no longer watching me like an enemy. And the court? The court was beginning to fear me. For the first time in this life, I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming something they hadn't prepared for. A woman with nothing left to lose. And everything to take. The next morning brought rain and rumors. My chambermaid whispered that the Dowager Duchess had collapsed after her estate funds were seized by the crown, an order passed using a forgotten clause I'd uncovered last week. Coincidence? No. That estate had bankrolled Talia's network. And without it, her grip on the older nobility was loosening. The court wouldn't see my fingerprints on it. But Talia would. Which meant she'd strike soon. I was halfway through a meeting with the treasurer when I felt eyes on me. Not the king's. Not the scribe's. Corwin stood by the archway, arms crossed, unreadable as always, but his gaze was fixed on me like a question he didn't yet trust himself to ask. Later that day, a package arrived in my chamber. Inside, a velvet box holding a dagger with my initials carved into the hilt. No note. No signature. Just a message. You are not safe. I stared at the blade, then placed it in my drawer beside my ledger. I wasn't afraid. I was expected. And I wasn't done yet. That evening, I visited the kitchens, loud, bustling, filled with people the court never noticed. I thanked them. I asked names. I offered solutions to the supply shortages no noble had bothered to fix. They told me more in an hour than the court had in a month. The next day, I arranged a tour of the city orphanage. I wore plain blue, tied back my hair, and brought warm bread with my name, not my title, on the note. I didn't pose for portraits. I listened. I laughed with children. I left with names. When I returned to the palace, the servants looked at me differently. So did Corwin. He found me in the north wing later that night, half buried in legal scrolls. You're everywhere, he said. I have to be. You're scaring them. Good. He stepped closer. And me? I met his gaze, steady. Are you scared of me, Corwin? No, he said. But I'm scared of how much I've started to believe in you. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because it was the first time in either life that a man had said those words and meant them not as flattery, but as fact. And it terrified me. Because I believed in him, too. That night, the tension between us shattered. He kissed me. No pretense. No strategy. Just raw, unfinished want. His hands were calloused, his mouth rough, and I welcomed every scrape and pull like a woman starved for something real. But when it ended, he pulled away, breath ragged. We can't afford this, he said. We can't afford to not have this, I replied. We need each other. Whether we admit it or not. Then say it, he said. Say you want me. I want you, I breathed. Not just for now. For what comes next. Then I'm yours, he said. But that means I'll protect you with everything I have. Even from yourself. We didn't sleep. We didn't undress. We just laid tangled in stolen peace, the storm outside no match for the one building inside us. But peace doesn't last in court. At dawn, the king summoned me. His tone was curt. The council chamber was full. Talia stood beside him, radiant in silver, expression smug. Lady Seraphina, the king said. There are questions about your recent influence. About funds moved without oversight. About reforms passed without due counsel. All legal, I said. All in service of the people. And yet, Talia purred, you move like someone with something to hide. If I'm being punished for efficiency, then let's call it what it is, fear, I said. You're afraid I'm doing more with less power than most of your lords have with titles. Murmurs. Frowns. The king's jaw tightened. But he didn't speak. Corwin stood in the shadows behind him, fists clenched. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I spoke to the room. If you think me dangerous now, imagine what I'll become when I'm allowed to do this without your leash. The chamber erupted. Not with outrage, but with awe. The younger lords looked at me with interest. The older ones with calculation. I'd drawn the line. And some of them were stepping over it toward me. Afterward, Corwin pulled me aside. That was reckless. That was necessary. You're forcing the king's hand. I want his crown, I said. And I want to wear it beside someone who doesn't flinch at the weight. He stared at me for a long moment. Then I guess I'd better start training my shoulders. And just like that, the air shifted between us again. No longer tension. Alignment. I wasn't just gaining power. I was gaining him. And for the first time since waking in this world, I felt something dangerous. Momentum. And that was more powerful than any throne. Momentum, I realized, was like fire, beautiful, consuming, and impossible to hold without getting burned. The court felt it too. Every glance I caught across the chamber held a little more weight, every curtsy dipped lower, every whisper carried my name like it was becoming law. The nobles who once called me an embarrassment now called me calculated. The servants who used to avoid my eyes now waited for my nod, my word, my favor. It was working. But it was also dangerous. Because Talia wasn't stupid. She didn't rise to power by being passive. And now that she was losing control, she did what predators do when cornered, she struck without mercy. It began with a rumor. I was found outside the royal library late at night, nothing scandalous, except the guards who saw me claimed I wasn't alone. They said they saw a man with me, tall, dark, shadowed. Corwin. And that was enough. By morning, the whispers had become accusations. The princess is compromised, they said. The night has corrupted her. She's not leading, she's being led. The king summoned Corwin first. I wasn't allowed in the chamber. He returned hours later, pale and tight-lipped, and told me nothing. I didn't ask. Because I already knew. They were going to separate us. That night, I received a formal order signed with the king's seal. Corwin was to be reassigned to the northern border. Effective immediately. It's exile, I whispered. No, he said. It's distraction. They think if they take me off the board, you'll crumble. Will you go? Not yet. He stepped closer, taking my hand. We don't have much time. Use what we've built. Finish what we started. I'll hold the line until you're ready. Ready for what? I asked. To take it all, he said. He kissed me hard, like a soldier memorizing the battlefield before marching into war, and left before dawn. The palace felt colder without him. I wore darker colors, spoke less in council, but acted more. I submitted 5 new reforms in 1 week. I visited trade guilds and mining lords, offered new routes and contracts. I promised things no royal had promised in decades, actual partnership. And it worked. One by one, the most powerful nobles began to pivot toward me. Talia tried to stop it with pageantry. She threw a feast, dressed in gold from head to toe, paraded the newly promoted General Marius beside her like a trophy. Loyalty should be rewarded, she said loudly at dinner. And betrayal should be dealt with swiftly. I raised my glass. Then you'd better run, I said. She smiled, but her knuckles went white around her goblet. I'd gotten under her skin. And I wasn't done. That night, I sent messages to 3 key nobles, all of whom held critical influence in the royal court's voting bloc. I asked for a private meeting at sunrise. I wore red. Not because I needed to be seen. Because I wanted to be remembered. I won't beg for your loyalty, I told them. But I will offer something Talia never has, results. You've seen what I've done in half a season. Imagine what I'll do with a year. They said nothing. But they listened. And sometimes, that's louder than words. By week's end, one of Talia's key allies announced his retirement. Another requested leave. A third accidentally leaked a letter supporting my trade plans to the press. The palace began to shift like sand. The king grew colder. Distant. The pressure mounted. And through it all, Corwin sent letters, coded, brief, hidden inside shipments. Still holding. Still yours. Each one was a breath I didn't know I was holding. But the next letter didn't come. Instead, a messenger arrived, blood on his cloak, panic in his eyes. Ambush, he said. Northern outpost. Sir Corwin's caravan, missing. The room spun. I held my expression, dismissed the messenger, and returned to my chamber before anyone could see me fall apart. I didn't cry. I planned. I gathered my allies, laid out a path for emergency deployment, and issued a royal directive allowing me to temporarily act in Corwin's absence. This is reckless, the king said. This is necessary, I replied. You created this instability. I'm the only one stabilizing it. You're playing with fire. Then you'd better learn to like the heat, I said. He said nothing. And that silence was my victory. That night, I stared out my window, fists clenched, wondering if I'd just won my empire and lost the one person who mattered most. Then a knock. A simple, single knock. I opened the door to find him, bloodied, bruised, standing. Alive. They tried, Corwin said. But they're not you. I pulled him into the room, held his face, and let the silence speak. We didn't say the word love. Not yet. But it was there. In every glance. In every scar. In every second we had clawed back from the edge. I was done surviving. I was done watching others win. I had power. I had him. And I was ready for war. The palace celebrated the end of winter with fireworks and feasts, but I had no time for parades or flattery. I had returned from the brink, not just with Corwin by my side, but with proof. Documents taken from the ambush. Names. Payments. A full trail leading directly back to Talia. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was a lit fuse. Corwin was still recovering. His arm was bandaged, his ribs bruised, but he stood beside me in every meeting, every council, every corridor that once echoed with whispers now fell silent when we walked through. The rumors didn't stop. They shifted. She's unstoppable, they said. He's her sword. They're building something bigger than the crown. And they were right. I didn't want a title. I wanted control. Not of the throne, but of the system that fed it. That meant real alliances, real leverage. And most of all, it meant removing the rotted roots poisoning the court. One by one, I called in the nobles who had supported Talia in the past. Some were eager to switch sides. Others needed convincing. I gave them numbers, tax revenues, trade growth, actual proof of what I had done. You can kneel to tradition, I said, or you can stand with progress. But don't stand in my way. Most chose wisely. Talia tried to strike back. She summoned Marius to testify against me. His words slick, rehearsed, delivered with the same confident smirk he wore the night I caught him with Talia in the old world. But I had learned my lesson. I didn't fight him with emotion. I fought him with evidence. Is it true, I asked during the hearing, that you signed the grain levy for the southern provinces 3 days before they reported shortages? It was a miscalculation, he said. Then why was the shipment rerouted to your cousin's estate? He stammered. The council murmured. I dropped a scroll with the seal of the royal accountant. And this letter from your steward confirms the route. Are we to assume every miscalculation benefits your family directly? He paled. You, spare me, I said. You've always been good at pretending. But even you can't fake math. The king ended the hearing early. Marius was suspended from all duties. Talia didn't attend the next council meeting. Her seat sat empty. The palace felt quieter. And more dangerous. Because the quiet is where true enemies move. Corwin began sleeping in my chamber, not out of desire, though there was plenty of that, but out of caution. We kept the window locked. The door guarded. And still, I felt the tension coil around us like a serpent waiting to strike. They won't stop, I whispered one night. Even when we win. They'll just find new ways to hide. Then we smoke them out, Corwin said. No more defense. We go on the attack. I nodded. We knew what that meant. We needed to control the press, the treasury, the military, all 3 pillars of influence. I already had the treasury, and Corwin had the soldiers. The last piece was the voice of the people. So I gave a speech. In the great square. No pomp. No title. Just me, standing on the palace steps, dressed in black and silver, hair unbound, speaking not like a princess but like a woman who had nothing left to prove. You've heard whispers, I said. You've seen the changes. I will not deny them. I am not the daughter the king wanted. I am not the noble the court expected. But I am the leader this realm needs. I told them about the trade deals. The reformed tax laws. The orphanages rebuilt. The mines regulated. I gave them numbers, not poetry. Facts, not flattery. I do not ask for your loyalty, I said at the end. I ask for your memory. Remember who built this when others tried to tear it down. The crowd erupted. Not with cheers. But with silence. The powerful kind. The kind that says, we see you. That night, Corwin pulled me into his arms and said, you just became something no royal has ever managed. What's that? I asked. Necessary. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. We just laid in silence, breathing the same air, knowing the final play was coming. And when it did, it came like a whisper. A single note slid under my door. No signature. Just 3 words. The crown falters. And a location. The Eastern Chapel. Midnight. I didn't hesitate. I wore my cloak, strapped the dagger Corwin had once gifted me to my thigh, and went alone. I found Talia waiting, dressed in white, hair braided with gold wire. You never could resist the dramatic, I said. You never could resist thinking you'd won, she replied. It's over, Talia. Not until one of us is gone, she said, stepping closer. You took everything from me. No, I said. I just made it so you couldn't keep stealing it. Then I guess this is goodbye, she said, and lunged. I didn't flinch. I sidestepped. Grabbed her wrist. Twisted. She screamed. Guards rushed in, mine. Not hers. And Corwin. Blade drawn, face thunderous. You're under arrest, I said, calm as stone. For treason, fraud, and impersonating someone powerful. You won't last, she spat. This court eats girls like you alive. Good, I said. I've always been hungry. She was dragged away. And I didn't watch her go. I turned to Corwin. It's done. Almost, he said. Now we build something better. And we would. Because this world had tried to bury me. But I was no longer soil. I was stone. And I was ready to rule.